Warning: you might find the content herein disturbing, but the truth must be revealed.
On October 27, 2019, a discussion titled Faith Panel on the Relationship Between Religion and Veganism, which took place in London, England, explored the interrelations between spiritual beliefs and cruelty-free plant-based living. It was organized as part of London's VegFest UK, one of the biggest annual vegan festivals in Great Britain, dedicated to celebrating, expanding, and relishing with gusto the life-affirming vegan trend. Among the panelists were scholars and activists from diverse religious backgrounds: Lara Balsom, director of the Jewish Vegetarian Society; Mara White, Muslim animal rights activist; Krishna Gandhi, Hindu animal rights activist; Dr. David Clough, Methodist preacher and professor of theological ethics at the University of Chester; Reverend Jenny Hiller, ordained minister and pioneer activist in the Anglican Diocese of Bristol, along with panel chair Tree Kelly, an anthropologist and PhD student at Manchester University. Each of the individuals in this respectable group of advocates reached the conclusion that being vegan is an essential aspect of following their respective holy scriptures. Moreover, it is the only way to truly live in harmony with the spiritual values of virtue and compassion. These panel members discuss how they came to realize that our concern for the welfare of animals lies at the very heart of any religious belief and thus should ideally be a top priority for any person of faith. In today's episode, we're going to hear about some of the ingrained cultural convictions and habits which act in many people of faith as impediments to espousing a mindful, meat and dairy-free lifestyle, and how religious vegan activists address these sensitive obstacles in the heart of their worshipping communities. For instance, though Hindu texts preach the practice of ahimsa or non-violence, there exists the pervasive use of milk and butter in the diets and rituals of believers, even though the dairy industry is rife with painfully abusive practices. What are some of our panelists' considered reflections on the dissonance between divine teachings and devotees' actions?
However, there is this dairy association within Hinduism, and it's very much misunderstood in the current times. So I just want to take this time to explain exactly how the practice of veganism does correlate with Hinduism, and that this Hindu dairy association needs clarity. Now, at that time of Krishna, milk, yogurt, and butter was being traded to a big city called Mathura, and that was on the demand of the evil king Gans. Because of this, nothing was left for the villagers or for the baby cows. And baby Krishna used to steal the butter with other children so that they could eat it and feed themselves and not be hungry. As he grew older, he would stop the gopis, that means the ladies who look after the cows, and do outreach work with them and stop them and explain to them and say, return the dairy products back to the villages and stop it going to the cities. He continued to do that, and because the trade continued to go to the cities, him and his friends would get together, and as a game, they would use slingshots and break the butter pots. And that was their form of activism, that was their form of protest. And that was used as a successful method to stop this trade going to cunts and going to the city, because it exploited the cows. It meant that there wasn't enough milk left for the calves, and the villagers were not fed well. And so today we see that this trade, unfortunately, is full back in swing to the city. So now, just to get to the Dairy Association, where it is instructed on how to look after the cows, there's associated scriptures with the Bhagavad Gita called the Vedas. And the Atharva Ved, part 2, 3, and 4, 5, goes into explaining and instructing exactly how to look after cows. So at that time, the Atharva Ved says that you only take milk from cows that are free and grazing in the sun, that are eating grass, and that have had their calves fed first. It also instructs us not to kill any cows. And we are not to drink any milk from cows that are not looked after this way. We know this instruction as religion is not adhered to in the current consumption of dairy. So from this point of view, Hinduism is congruent and coherent with veganism, but the modern day practice doesn't understand this association with dairy and the consumption of it, and it's completely violating the scriptures and the understanding, because first and foremost, they have to see the life and the being and the value of the life of the cow that becomes part of a family member.
I think in terms of barriers that I've experienced, I think there's two sets really. The first is sort of theological ones, and again, this reference that people make back to Genesis that God gave humans dominion over the earth. And historically, that's been kind of received as being more like domination and an excuse to kind of use and exploit the earth's resources. And it's actually been used to justify colonialism, patriarchy, racism, and is now used to justify the way that we treat the planet, basically, and its inhabitants. And I think there's a shift in people's thinking in Christianity, which is really refreshing, that to understand dominion, not as domination, but as stewardship. And that means that we have responsibility towards and for God's creation, not our kind of playground and resource pit. So we're looking after it on behalf of God, and we're actually thinking about the consequences of what happens when we don't look after it. And I think we're obviously facing those now as a species.
I think there's an added layer with Jews, because Jews are notorious for thinking about food, talking about food. We have very strict dietary laws. And I think there's a base level of practical challenge that I have when I'm approaching Jewish people and talking about veganism. So you have the food that's associated with religious occasions, with Jewish festivals throughout the calendar year. So we have Passover, which happens, broadly speaking, when Easter is taking place. The symbol of that is a plate with different foods that symbolize us being released from slavery. And at a practical level, you face a choice between honoring your veganism and honouring your religion. So we have to challenge that. But also there's foods that have been passed down through generations, through families, from people who've either chosen to leave countries, they've migrated, or they've been forced to flee. And a lot of the work that we do is trying to persuade people that you don't have to choose between your religion and your diet. And so what we've put a lot of effort in with is taking these very stereotypically Jewish dishes and veganizing them and saying to people, look, you can have 90% of the taste and it's vegan, and you don't have to make such a sacrifice.
Indeed, we don't have to abandon religious culinary traditions to adopt a vegan diet. We can integrate and embrace both, thanks to the ever-burgeoning cornucopia of plant-based substitutes that are readily available in the markets today, and thanks to the proliferation on the internet of delicious, healthy, and ingeniously creative vegan recipes which emulate time-honored dishes. Heroic viewers, thank you for joining us today for Practice What You Believe Faith Panel on the relationship between religion and veganism, part 2 of 4.